It was just after dawn in the quiet seaside town of Port Lincoln, South Australia. A town known more for its tuna fisheries and peaceful harbor views than for horrific crime scenes. But on June 19th, 2025, that peace shattered. Sirens pierced the morning calm as emergency services were dispatched to a report of a small fire inside a modest apartment on Liverpool Street. At first, responders assumed it would be routine, maybe an electrical mishap, maybe a kitchen fire. No one expected the nightmare that waited behind the smoke-stained walls. When firefighters forced entry into the apartment, they were met with the thick stench of burnt flesh and the suffocating heat of a fire that had mostly extinguished itself. The interior was charred, but contained as if someone had tried to destroy something, but hadn't quite finished the job. The blaze was localized to the bathroom, and it was there, behind the scorched and cracked door, that the body of 39-year-old Julian Story was found. Or rather, what remained of him. Julian's corpse was naked, burned beyond recognition in some areas, and grotesquely mutilated. Most shockingly, his head was missing. Not severed by fire or accident, it had been deliberately removed. A human decapitation. For the first time in the city's recent history, police were staring at a level of violence that felt ritualistic, unthinkable, and there was more. In the backyard of the home, sitting cross-legged and unresponsive, was 34-year-old Tamika Chesser, once known to Australian audiences as a contestant on the 2010 season of Beauty and the Geek. But now, she was bloodstained, barefoot, and staring into space, as if lost in another world. Police officers tried speaking to her. She wouldn't answer, wouldn't blink, wouldn't move. There were no signs of distress, no attempts to run. It was as if she had completely disconnected from reality. A neighbor later told reporters, she looked gone, not scared, not crying, just empty. Tamika was immediately taken into custody, but she didn't speak, she didn't explain. And as forensic teams began examining the crime scene, it became clear this was no accident. This was murder. Brutal, intimate, and savage. Back inside the apartment, investigators discovered pools of dried blood in the bedroom and bathroom. Burn patterns indicated an accelerant had been used, a calculated attempt to destroy evidence. The flames were controlled, isolated. This wasn't a chaotic inferno. It was surgical. The killer had tried to incinerate the scene but failed to erase the horror. But the biggest question wasn't what happened. It was, where was Julian's head? Despite searching the entire property, drains, trash bins, and the nearby yard, the head was nowhere to be found. It hadn't been burned. It hadn't been buried. It had vanished. What followed was a citywide alert. Port Lincoln, a place not used to such atrocities, was now the center of a nationwide investigation. Police combed through surveillance footage, questioned neighbors, traced movements. Nothing. Not one image showed Julian leaving. Not one record showed Tamika purchasing suspicious items, and yet one man was dead and part of him was still missing. Who was Julian Story? Why had he been killed? Why had Tamika, a woman with a public persona, a glamour model, a social media influencer, a known reality TV figure, turned into a suspect in such a gruesome crime? And what had happened in those 2 days between his murder and the fire? Neighbors recalled hearing a loud argument late on June 17th. One described a blood-curdling scream around midnight. Another saw smoke drifting from the bathroom window the next day, but assumed someone was burning incense or hair products. None of them could have imagined the truth. Meanwhile, the media erupted. Reality star turned killer splashed across front pages. Images of Tamika smiling on red carpets were placed side by side with crime scene photos, blurred but haunting. Journalists dug into her past. Some painted her as a troubled celebrity who had spiraled into darkness. Others wondered if she had snapped, mentally broken by fame, isolation, or abuse. But facts were scarce. The only confirmed truth was this: a man was murdered and mutilated in his home. His partner, a once famous woman now silent and catatonic, was found near the scene, and his head was still missing. For police, it was a race against time. The longer the head remained unfound, the harder it would be to confirm the manner of death or even piece together the exact sequence of events. Was he killed with a blunt object? Was he drugged? Tortured? Had he died before or after the decapitation? Detective Sergeant Fiona Mackenzie, lead investigator on the case, told reporters, "This isn't just about building a prosecution. It's about giving this man's family closure. They can't bury him properly. They can't say goodbye. Until we find that head, he's not at rest, and neither are we." The case quickly drew public interest not only in Australia, but internationally. Social media platforms exploded with theories. Some believed Tamika had acted out of jealousy. Others thought Julian had harmed her first. A darker corner of the internet even suggested satanic rituals or serial killings. But the truth, police said, was more chilling in its simplicity. One person died. One person was found with the body. And no one knew why. Tamika remained unresponsive during initial questioning. At her arraignment, she did not speak. She did not plead. She was remanded to a secure psychiatric facility under a forensic mental health order. Her attorney later issued a brief statement. "Our client is not in a state to make decisions or statements. We request privacy as her mental evaluation continues." Behind the scenes, however, authorities were intensifying their search. Drones were launched over the coastline. Divers were deployed into the harbor. Trash pickups were examined. Dogs trained to detect human remains were brought in from Adelaide, and dozens of volunteers scoured nearby bushland, hoping to find anything that could lead them to the missing piece of Julian's story. Because no one could forget it, the man was missing his head. And in the silence that followed, one question echoed louder than the rest. Where is it? Before she was the centerpiece of a gruesome homicide investigation, before police discovered her partner's decapitated body in a fire-scorched bathroom, Tamika Chesser was something else entirely. She was a name, a face, a fleeting celebrity whose rise and fall mirrored the turbulent chaos beneath the surface of her public persona. For millions across Australia, the first time they saw Tamika was in 2010 when she appeared on Season 2 of Beauty and the Geek Australia, a reality TV show known for its comedic pairing of glamorous women with socially awkward intellectuals. Tamika was the beauty archetype, confident, attractive, and unapologetically provocative. Even then she stood out. Her style was bold, her personality brash. Audiences either loved her or hated her. There was no middle ground. But what few realized back then was how closely Tamika blurred the line between television performance and real-life volatility. After her reality TV appearance, Tamika capitalized on her brief fame. She posed for men's magazines like FHM and Playboy, often leaning into her sultry persona. She gained a substantial online following, later launching an OnlyFans account where she posted adult content and built a niche audience of devoted subscribers. On the surface, it looked like she was thriving, beautiful, independent, empowered. But beneath that curated image was a woman with a deeply complicated past. Tamika Chesser was no stranger to trouble. Born in Queensland, she had a turbulent upbringing marked by family instability and early brushes with the law. As a teenager, Tamika reportedly struggled with anger issues and erratic behavior. She was expelled from multiple schools and had a reputation for both charisma and chaos. Friends described her as someone who could command a room one minute and destroy it the next. As her modeling career blossomed in the mid-2010s, Tamika was simultaneously battling demons the public couldn't see. She had mental health struggles, with reports suggesting diagnoses ranging from bipolar disorder to dissociative states. In 2017, she was arrested for assaulting a police officer during a bar fight in Brisbane. The charges were eventually dropped, but the incident hinted at a volatile temper and a disregard for authority. Over the next few years, she seemed to disappear from the mainstream spotlight, but she didn't vanish entirely. She resurfaced online, rebranding herself as a spiritual influencer, posting cryptic messages about the universe, karma, and trauma. Her social media feeds were erratic moments of clarity, punctuated by unhinged rants. She claimed to have survived abuse. She posted about being targeted, followed, manipulated. She accused people of poisoning her food. She often referred to herself as awakened, a soul caught between dimensions. Those who knew her said they feared for her well-being, but others saw her as manipulative, someone who weaponized mental illness as an excuse. There was no consensus, only contradictions. And then, there was Julian's story. Julian and Tamika had been romantically linked for less than a year before the murder. Not much is publicly known about their relationship's origins, but they were reportedly living together in the Port Lincoln apartment by early 2025. Some say Julian met her during a photo shoot. Others claim they bonded over mutual trauma. Whatever the truth, those closest to them said the relationship was toxic from the beginning. Neighbors in the building where they lived later told police about frequent arguments. One resident described almost nightly shouting matches, while another reported hearing things being thrown against walls. Police had been called to the property at least once in the months before the murder for a noise disturbance. But there were no arrests, no formal complaints, just tension simmering, escalating. Julian was known to some locals as a quiet but troubled man. He had a criminal record for petty theft and had reportedly struggled with drug use in the past. But he was also trying to rebuild his life, according to friends. He worked odd jobs, kept to himself, and reportedly worshipped Tamika. Several witnesses described him as completely devoted to her, willing to overlook outbursts, disappearances, and paranoia because he believed she needed him. But devotion is not the same as stability, and love, when entangled with delusion, can become a ticking bomb. According to court documents released after Tamika's arrest, she had previously accused Julian of stalking her despite living with him. In one post to her social media, made just weeks before the murder, she wrote cryptically, "They watch me sleep. The devil wears skin." Investigators believe she was referring to Julian. It's unclear whether she was suffering a psychotic break or simply creating a narrative to justify something she already planned. But what is clear is that the relationship was spiraling, and no one stepped in to stop it. Tamika's friends, at least those still in contact with her, have offered mixed reactions since the arrest. Some insist she was a victim, manipulated by men her entire life. Others say she had become dangerous, a woman who isolated herself, refused help, and began speaking about cleansing the darkness from the world. That phrase, cleansing the darkness, is now a chilling detail. Police found it scrawled in red lipstick across the cracked bathroom mirror of the apartment where Julian was killed. They also discovered burned notebooks in the fireplace, half-destroyed pages filled with strange symbols, disjointed poetry, and disturbing sketches of faceless people. This wasn't just a crime scene. It was the aftermath of a psychological collapse. Experts now say Tamika may have been experiencing a full-blown psychotic episode at the time of the murder. Whether triggered by untreated mental illness, substance abuse, or some combination of both remains unclear. Toxicology reports are pending, and Tamika has refused to undergo a full psychiatric evaluation. Instead, she sits in near silence, housed in a secure forensic mental health facility under 24-hour observation. There's an eerie poetry to her silence. A woman once defined by her voice, whether on TV, in magazines, or on the internet, is now mute, unwilling or unable to explain why the man she lived with is now dead, burned, and beheaded. And until she talks, we may never know what pushed her over the edge. Was it years of untreated trauma, a moment of uncontrollable rage, or something far more sinister? The media has been quick to draw comparisons. Some call her the Australian Jodi Arias. Others have likened her to Luca Magnotta, another fame-seeker turned killer. But those comparisons, while headline-friendly, miss the deeper point. Tamika's story isn't just about murder. It's about mental illness, obsession, the cost of unfiltered fame in a society that often watches, judges, and forgets. Until it's too late. The woman in the red carpet photos and magazine spreads is gone. In her place sits someone else's shell, perhaps, of who she once was. Or maybe this version was always there, waiting behind the eyes of the smiling influencer, waiting for the moment to emerge. And on June 17th, it did. The hardest part of any murder investigation is separating fact from fog. Time becomes fluid. Witnesses forget details. Memories blur. But for detectives in Port Lincoln, Australia, the timeline leading up to Julian Story's murder and the 2 eerie, silent days that followed may hold the answers to the questions no one can yet bring themselves to ask out loud. It begins sometime in the early evening of Monday, June 17th, 2025. Tamika Chesser and Julian Story are inside their apartment on Liverpool Street, a modest unit tucked inside a quiet coastal neighborhood. The two had lived there together for several months, but according to neighbors, tension had been building. On this particular night, one resident reported hearing violent yelling around 9:45 p.m. Another said she heard glass breaking shortly after 10 p.m., followed by a thud, like someone being shoved against a wall. Still, no one called the police. In small towns, sometimes the silence is unintentional. Other times it's deliberate. People mind their own business. But this time, silence had consequences. By midnight, the sound stopped. No more yelling, no more footsteps, just stillness. What happened inside the apartment during those crucial hours remains, for now, largely unknown. But investigators believe Julian's Story was killed between midnight and 2 a.m. on June 18th. They estimate this based on temperature readings taken from the body and the apartment's internal fire damage, subtle clues that place the time of death with unsettling accuracy. The coroner's preliminary report indicates that Julian likely died before the fire began. Though the body was burned, some vital signs were still detectable. There was no soot in the lungs and no evidence he had inhaled smoke. He was dead before the flames touched him. But what's most disturbing is the level of post-mortem mutilation. Julian had not only been killed, he had been dismembered. Multiple limbs showed signs of sharp force trauma, likely inflicted with a kitchen knife later recovered from the sink. The blade was scorched but intact. Blood residue was found inside the drain, on the bathroom tiles, and smeared across the hallway walls. But there were no bloody footprints, no signs of frantic escape or struggle. The apartment wasn't ransacked, it was controlled, clean in areas, almost methodical. Police believe that after killing Julian, Tamika attempted to destroy the body by starting a controlled fire in the bathroom. She poured an accelerant, possibly lighter fluid, across the torso, arms, and legs. She wrapped parts of his body in plastic sheets, which slowed the burn, preventing complete destruction. Then investigators say she removed his head using a different, jagged tool. Forensic examiners believe it was a serrated blade or even a handsaw based on the irregular bone marks left on the cervical vertebrae. And then, the head vanished. What's chilling is the calculated nature of what happened next. Rather than flee the scene, rather than call the police, rather than harm herself or make a statement, Tamika stayed. For 2 entire days, she remained in the apartment with her partner's burned, mutilated body. She ate, she drank. Surveillance footage shows her at a nearby gas station the morning of June 18th, dressed casually, purchasing cigarettes and a bottle of water. The attendant remembered her. He said she seemed quiet, distant, but not distressed, not panicked. She was calm, he told investigators, like nothing was wrong. That image of a woman calmly shopping with a decapitated body waiting in her bathroom sent waves of horror through the public. How could anyone be so disconnected from reality? Was she in shock, or was she hiding something darker? On June 19th at approximately 7:30 a.m., neighbors noticed smoke wafting from the apartment's bathroom window. One resident, concerned it could spread, called the fire department. Within minutes, firefighters arrived on scene. What they found inside would spark one of the most high-profile murder investigations in recent Australian memory. They kicked down the door. The living room was untouched. A few lights were still on. Music was faintly playing from a small speaker in the corner. But the air, thick, bitter, and choking, led them straight to the bathroom. There, partially wrapped in melted plastic, lay Julian's Story. Arms charred, torso blackened, head missing. Burned pages of a notebook were scattered nearby. The words, "Cleanse the evil," and "They're watching us," could be seen on the fragments. A large pool of blood had dried under the bathtub. The fire had been contained but not extinguished. It seemed to be smoldering, as if someone lit it and then walked away. In the backyard, Tamika Chesser was found sitting cross-legged in the grass, barefoot, expressionless. Her clothes were stained, her hands blackened with soot. But she made no effort to run, no protest. She did not speak a single word as officers handcuffed her and led her to a waiting patrol car. In the hours that followed, forensic units combed the apartment. They found the knife. They found burned clothing. They found blood patterns indicating Julian had likely been dragged from the bedroom to the bathroom post-mortem, and yet no head. Not in the drains, not in the bins, not in the plumbing, not buried outside. Security cameras from nearby streets showed no footage of Tamika disposing of anything. She didn't leave with bags. She didn't hail a cab. If she moved the head, and investigators are convinced she did, it had to have been before dawn on June 18th, and done very discreetly. Police launched a massive search operation. Divers were sent into nearby bodies of water. Drones scanned the surrounding forest. Garbage trucks were halted and checked. Dog teams searched for decomposing scent trails, but there was nothing. The head was gone. Theories flooded social media. She buried it in the bush. She tossed it off a cliff into the sea. She stored it in a freezer. She kept it as a trophy. The truth? No one knows. Even Tamika's lawyers have no idea what she did with it. She hasn't spoken since the arrest. Her mental health evaluation remains sealed. She was deemed unfit to stand trial for now and transferred to a high-security psychiatric facility outside Adelaide. Meanwhile, detectives tried to piece together a motive. Was this a crime of passion? A psychotic break? Self-defense gone horribly wrong? There are signs Tamika believed Julian was watching her sleep, that he was sent to control her based on journal entries and paranoid messages she posted online weeks prior. But there's no hard evidence Julian posed a physical threat, no restraining orders, no recorded violence. Yet something snapped, and the timeline is clear. June 17th, midnight, the last sounds of argument are heard. June 18th, morning, Tamika seen casually buying cigarettes. June 19th, morning, fire alarms, police arrive, body found. June 20th onward, a city in shock, a family grieving, and a head still missing. In murder cases, time is often the enemy, but in this case, it's a haunting witness. Every minute Tamika stayed in that apartment, every moment she didn't call for help, deepened the mystery. What did she do during those 2 silent days? What did she think about as she sat near a mutilated corpse? Why didn't she leave? And perhaps most chilling of all, what did she do with the head? Because without it, justice still feels incomplete. And as long as it remains missing, one thing is certain. The story of Julian's story isn't over. In most homicide investigations, the discovery of a body begins the process of closure. Police identify the victim, forensics reconstruct the scene. Families get the chance, painful as it may be, to bury their loved ones. But in this case, closure was not just delayed, it was decapitated. The murder of Julian's story had already gripped the nation. The burned, headless body of a 39-year-old man discovered in the bathroom of a fire-damaged apartment. His partner, Tamika Chesser, a former reality TV contestant and model, sat silently in the backyard, barefoot and smeared with ash. But the most disturbing detail, the one that left even hardened detectives stunned, wasn't just the act of murder. It was the fact that his head was gone. Not destroyed, not burned to ash, not accidentally severed by fire. Intentionally removed and missing. Within hours of the discovery on June 19th, South Australian police launched an urgent manhunt, not for a suspect who they already had in custody, but for the missing piece of Julian's body. In all their experience, this wasn't just rare, it was nearly unprecedented. A hunt. Unlike any other, Detective Sergeant Fiona McKenzie, lead investigator on the case, addressed reporters just 1 day after the body was found. We are currently engaged in an extensive search for the missing remains of Mr. Story. It is our belief that his head was removed post-mortem and transported from the scene. The recovery of this evidence is critical to our investigation and vital for his family's peace. And so began a multi-agency operation. Drones swept across the coastal bushlands surrounding Port Lincoln. Underwater dive teams searched the nearby marina. Garbage trucks were halted. Their contents were examined, piece by piece. Cadaver dogs trained to detect decomposing human remains were brought in from Adelaide. They combed through neighborhoods, parks, drains, even roof cavities in nearby properties. Nothing. Police retraced every step Tamika could have taken. On June 18th, surveillance footage showed her at a gas station, alone, purchasing cigarettes and a drink. But she carried no bag, no suitcase, no visible container. Officers canvassed local businesses for footage of her leaving the apartment with anything large enough to conceal a human head. They found nothing suspicious, not one clip. So they widened the search and widened it again. Forensic teams examined the drains in and around the apartment. If Tamika had tried to flush the head, an almost impossible task, there would be biological residue. There was none. If she had incinerated it, surely the bones would leave traceable fragments. None were found. Detectives considered whether she might have buried it, but the ground around the apartment was undisturbed. Dogs didn't react to any nearby soil samples. Surveillance from the street showed no evidence of her leaving the home on foot during those 2 key days, June 17th to 19th. It was as if the head had vanished into thin air. A town on edge. News of the missing head turned what was already a grisly murder case into something bordering on folklore. Rumors swirled through Port Lincoln like wildfire. People whispered about ritualistic killings. Talk of cannibalism, occult ceremonies, and satanic practices flooded social media and message boards. Local Facebook groups filled with speculation. One post suggested Tamika had hidden the head in a freezer. Another claimed she may have mailed it to someone. A few even believed she had kept it in the apartment hidden behind a false wall or beneath the floorboards. Police investigated all of it. They tore apart the apartment's flooring. They x-rayed the walls, they checked nearby post offices, and scanned recent shipments from the area. Nothing turned up. As pressure mounted, volunteers joined the effort. Over 60 people, including friends of Julian's family, helped scour public parks, beaches, and hiking trails. Officers followed up on dozens of tips, including one that led them to a rural storage shed several miles out of town. The shed contained burned trash, clothing, and discarded magazines, but no head. "We've never had anything like this," said one local volunteer. "It's not just that a man was killed. It's that a piece of him is still out there, and no one knows why." A forensic puzzle. From a legal standpoint, the missing head posed a unique problem. Forensic investigators rely on the skull for a number of critical details: the angle of attack, the nature of the injury, whether or not the victim was conscious at the time of death. All of it can be determined from wounds to the head. Even toxicology reports, in some cases, rely on samples from the brain or ocular fluids. Without that evidence, the case against Tamika was built on circumstantial and forensic clues: the presence of her DNA, the location of the body, the blood patterns, and the tools found in the apartment. But why the motive remains murky. Was it a psychotic break? A carefully planned crime? Did Tamika believe she was cleansing something dark, protecting herself, silencing a voice? The head might hold the answers. Theories in darkness. Investigators believe there are 3 main possibilities. 1. Tamika disposed of the head shortly after the murder, during the early morning hours of June 18th. If so, she did it fast and without detection. Some believe she may have used a duffel bag, possibly discarded later. Police are still trying to trace any discarded luggage from the area. 2. She concealed it somewhere extremely specific: a crawl space, a hollowed-out pipe, a trash compactor. Some believe the head may have been placed in a location so unconventional it hasn't even occurred to investigators yet. 3. She didn't dispose of it at all. This theory is the darkest, that Tamika may have kept it with her, either hidden within the apartment or moved again after police arrived, possibly during transfer or hospitalization. Though this seems unlikely, authorities haven't ruled it out entirely. There is also the unthinkable possibility that the head may never be found. A family without closure. For Julian's family, the nightmare hasn't ended. His funeral was postponed, his burial incomplete. His mother, in a statement to the press, said, "We just want to give our son the dignity of being whole. No parent should have to bury their child like this. We need to find him, all of him." The grief has been amplified by the cruelty of absence. It's one thing to lose someone. It's another to lose them in pieces, both literally and emotionally. The South Australian police have pleaded with the public for any information, even the smallest detail: a forgotten camera, A memory of seeing Tamika near a bin or forested area could be the thread that unravels the mystery. But so far, the silence is deafening. Tamika remains uncooperative. She has not spoken since her arrest. Not to officers, not to psychologists, not even to her own lawyers. And so the search continues. The case becomes myth. In just 10 days, the murder of Julian Story went from a domestic dispute to a national obsession. But with every passing hour that his head remains missing, the case starts to slip into something else, something closer to legend than investigation. Crime historians are already calling it one of Australia's most macabre and puzzling murders in recent memory. It has the elements of horror fiction, a reality TV star turned silent killer, a body destroyed by fire, and a missing piece of evidence that refuses to be found. But this isn't a storybook. It's real, and it's far from over. Because until that head is found, until every piece of Julian's story is returned, this crime is still incomplete. And somewhere, in the shadows of Port Lincoln, the answer waits. Buried, hidden, or worse, forgotten. A man was murdered, his body burned, his head removed and still missing. A former reality star was arrested at the scene, covered in ash and silence. But even after the horror of what happened inside that Port Lincoln apartment, the legal system wasn't rushing toward a verdict. Instead, it was stalling, slowed by shadows, by silence, and by one devastating uncertainty. Was Tamika Chesser sane when it happened? And more importantly, is she sane now? A silent suspect. Tamika Chesser hasn't said a word since police found her sitting in the backyard of her apartment, just meters from the smoldering remains of her partner, Julian Story. No confession, no denial, not even a murmur of remorse or panic, just silence. Officers described her as vacant, almost in a trance. In the back of the patrol car, she didn't cry. She didn't ask why she was being arrested. She didn't speak to her lawyer during intake. When her name was called in court the next morning, she didn't stand. She didn't blink. She didn't react. It wasn't defiance. It was something else, something more terrifying. Detachment. The court moved forward anyway. She was officially charged with murder, desecration of human remains, assaulting a police or emergency worker during her transport. Bail was immediately denied, citing risk of flight, unpredictability, and potential danger to herself and others. But even as her case began its slow march through the South Australian legal system, a more pressing question loomed large. Was she mentally fit to stand trial? Inside the mind of a killer? Tamika was transferred from local jail to James Nash House, a high-security forensic mental health facility in Adelaide. There, she was placed under 24-hour surveillance, assessed by a team of psychiatric professionals who specialize in criminal behavior and psychosis. The goal? To determine if she understood the charges against her and if she could assist in her defense. Their initial findings were grim. Sources close to the case say Tamika exhibited extreme disassociation. She often sat motionless for hours, refused to eat meals, and sometimes whispered to herself in a language no one could understand. She refused therapy, medication, and interviews. Nurses described her as lost in a reality entirely her own. But what made her dangerous wasn't just her silence, it was the possibility that she was choosing it. Psychiatrists struggled to determine if her condition was organic, the result of schizophrenia, dissociation, or a psychotic break, or if it was strategic. Was Tamika faking insanity to avoid prison? Or was she truly fractured? Some professionals believe she was delusional, obsessed with spiritual warfare and dark energies. Notes found in her apartment, the burned pages of a journal hinted at paranoid delusions. One line read, "They replaced his thoughts. I had to erase the infection." Another passage read, "Only fire can cleanse what they implanted." Was Tamika hallucinating? Hearing voices? Acting out of fear that Julian had become some kind of possessed entity? If so, the law might not punish her. It might hospitalize her instead. The insanity dilemma. Under Australian criminal law, a person found not guilty by reason of mental incompetence isn't set free. But neither are they convicted. Instead, they are committed to long-term psychiatric detention, reviewed regularly by medical panels and legal authorities. Some remain hospitalized for life. Others are released after years, once deemed safe. It's not a loophole, it's a tragedy, because the law cannot punish someone who did not know what they were doing or could not stop themselves from doing it. But proving insanity is a tightrope act. Defense teams must show that at the time of the crime, the suspect could not comprehend the nature or wrongness of their actions, was suffering from a severe mental illness, not just emotional distress, acted without awareness or intention. Tamika's team, as of now, is leaning toward this defense. Her lead attorney, during a closed-door hearing, reportedly told the court, "My client is in a condition we believe is consistent with acute psychosis. She is currently incapable of participating in her own defense. We ask that the court pause further action until she is stabilized and evaluated fully." The court agreed. All proceedings have been delayed until December 2025, pending a final psychiatric report. Public reaction: justice or excuse? Outside the courtroom, however, public sentiment is boiling. To Julian's family, the idea that Tamika might avoid a prison sentence is devastating. His mother called it a mockery of justice. His sister took to social media writing, "She didn't just kill him, she dismembered him. She burned him. She removed his head and walked around like nothing happened. If that's not evil, then what is?" True crime communities online are equally divided. Some see Tamika as a manipulator, a woman using her history of fame, mental illness, and beauty to escape punishment. Others see her as a victim of a system that ignored red flags for years, a woman crying out for help but never truly heard. And then there are those who simply don't know what to believe, because every time they look at her, they see both the influencer in designer heels and the hollow-eyed suspect in forensic detention. The truth, it seems, is a blend of both. Unanswered questions. With Tamika silent and the head still missing, the case against her remains unfinished. Investigators still don't know. What exactly happened between June 17th and June 19th? Why the fire was lit? Whether Julian was asleep, awake, or already dead when the attack began? What she did with his head, or why she took it at all? The longer Tamika stays uncooperative, the harder it becomes to fill in the blanks. Detectives have theorized she may have experienced a complete psychotic break, believing Julian was a threat, a parasite, a possessed being, as one journal suggested. If true, then Tamika didn't act out of malice. She acted out of fear, fear of something that existed only in her own mind. And if false, then what remains is a murder so cold, so controlled, so disturbing it may be remembered for decades as one of Australia's most chilling domestic homicides. What comes next? As of now, Tamika remains in James Nash House. She is monitored constantly. She has no access to media, no contact with the public. Her legal team says she spends most of her time staring out of her cell window, occasionally drawing on napkins, and once, just once, asking for a mirror. The December court date looms, but many believe it will be pushed further. Because if Tamika never regains competency, she may never face a courtroom. She may remain in mental detention indefinitely. Meanwhile, Julian's family waits. They wait for answers. They wait for justice. And more than anything, they wait for his head to be found so they can bury him whole. Final thoughts. The story of Tamika Chesser and Julian's story is not just about murder. It's about what happens when reality slips, when mental illness, fame, and unchecked trauma combine in silence and isolation. Tamika wasn't just a woman with a past. She was a woman with warning signs, visible ones that no one fully confronted. Her collapse wasn't sudden. It was slow, loud in hindsight, but invisible in real time. And now, it's too late. One man is dead. Another family is broken. A woman who once walked red carpets now sits alone in a padded room. And somewhere out there, a human head is still missing. Justice is coming. But for now, it waits. What happened to Julian's story is more than a murder. It's a descent into madness, silence, and shadows that may never fully lift. If you were gripped by this disturbing tale, stay with us, because on the Untold Trace, the darkness only deepens. Like this video, leave a comment with your theories, and make sure you subscribe so you never miss the truth they don't want you to hear.